pleased to bring you our feature presentation.
In an alternate universe, the United States of America is caught in the crossfire of supernatural events that have been targeting its national monuments. Many accounts claim to have witnessed these strange occurrences taking place at significant locations such as the Statue of Liberty, Mount Rushmore, the Washington Monument, and many others. While these take place, history is altered as well. Many well-known figures who died in our world ended up living past their day of death in this alternate timeline. This separate reality of our modern-day country follows a narrative that bears a message stating, there is more than meets the eye. We like to call it, the Monument Mythos. Jeez, that intro was longer than the previous one. Anyways, for those who are not aware, an analog horror series has taken the internet by storm in recent years, and as I've stated before, it is called the Monument Mythos. I only just learned about this series earlier this year through my older cousin who showed me one of the videos and it freaked me out. I won't disclose which one it is yet until we get into it later in the video. With the series already in its 4th season, it may be easy to get lost when starting it, especially since the first few episodes are extremely vague and explanations to certain events are given in later installments. So that is why in this video, we will be taking a closer look at each Monument Mythos video in the 1st season in order to understand its context and timeline. Each episode will be explained by me, scene for scene, then I will give my thoughts on what happened in each episode. So each point will be in the order of episodes the wiki presents, and I will also take note of the comments on each of the episodes to get more input on the public's interpretation of the series. Also, I am by no means a deep diver kind of guy, especially since this series holds a lot of clues that could go completely over my head. But those who have seen a bulk of the series and stumbled upon this video and notice I made a mistake, the comments are there for a reason. Now, without further ado, let's take a look at the first video. Liberty Lurker begins with an interview of a French designer who worked on the Statue of Liberty. He explains the difficult demands a US ambassador gave him and his team while working on the statue. The ambassador vigorously asked for the pedestal of the statue to be much larger than the architectures previously intended to make it. Despite concerns, they agreed nonetheless. After this interview, we are shown blueprints of the statue's 1949 renovation. In this blueprint, we see an engine at the bottom of the pedestal, which has an axle attached to it going all the way up to the top of the pedestal. We see that it is actually connected to wheels just below the statue's feet. Right above the engine, a door leading to some stairs provides an entrance to a waste storage area. We are then shown another audio interview from an Italian immigrant who had to go through Ellis Island while gaining citizenship. She describes a foul odor that she could constantly smell while on the island and described it as the smell of a slaughterhouse. She then describes how she recalled seeing authorities leading immigrants of Ellis Island into the waste storage unit of the statue's pedestal, only to leave shortly afterward, then followed by nothing happening. The smell only got worse every time this would occur. And then, we are shown this footage. From what I can infer, authorities of Ellis Island kept this eldritch horror type of creature in the storage unit of the statue's pedestal and would feed it when it was hungry. When the immigrants were eaten, it caused the smell that was described as a slaughterhouse to get worse. But why would they keep this creature inside a storage unit and continue to feed it living people? Oh man, this is the video that freaked me out the most, which is the first Monument Mythos video I watched, like I mentioned earlier. It begins with an ominous message stating that on August 7, 2003, Mount Rushmore was vandalized with spray paint messages saying the US government can fund mass murder if it's called a national monument, and the blood of liberty will be avenged, along with many others. But exactly 1 week later, Rushmore was vandalized again. One message was noted saying, I will introduce infections next week, Monday through Sunday. Watch the symptoms. After this, cameras were set up that same week in order to catch any suspicious activity within the park. Each day, Monday through Sunday, a recording is made to try and catch anyone trying to vandalize the mountain. The first 5 days are met with nothing as the camera zooms in on different parts of the mountain, only to find nothing. They show the Saturday footage, only for it to be pitch black with a remove lens cap message popping up over and over again. And then, the Sunday clip is shown. Yeah, this video really got me the first time I saw it, and I watched it on a TV in my room with my cousin late at night. Imagine trying to sleep right after watching that. Bet you can. Anyways, the video does a really good job of creeping out the viewer due to not relying on jump scares, just disturbing images and creepy camera shots. Definitely the most terrifying episode so far. Anyways, it ends with a quote that reveals that park rangers started putting baby powder on top of the mountain. Baby powder is used to help fight fungus, and as we saw in the clip, there were giant spike-like growths coming out of, well, what used to be the heads of the president. This is most likely some kind of fungus, and that's why they powder it every night. A shot of the island of Alcatraz is shown, while text appears at the bottom of the screen saying, 2 days before therapy. We are then shown this old video showcasing a map of Alcatraz and all of its features. The video ends abruptly, and we return to the opening shot of the island, but only this time it's closer. The bottom text reads, 1 day before therapy. The old style of video reappears, and we are shown a representation of what's called Alcatraz-osis. We see what look like cells inside of a living body all come together inside a sphere, and this causes the sphere to double. It ends and we come back to the shot of Alcatraz again, and the bottom text now reads, Radiation Therapy Number 1. All of a sudden, a red circular silhouette appears in the video. It disappears, and we are then shown a video describing the island's movement throughout the years, and it shows it traveling to the coast of San Francisco and consuming it in a dark matter. The video ends, and we return to the shot of the island one last time while the text, 1 day after therapy, is shown. And then, the camera pans over to this. From what I can gather, the island of Alcatraz is implied to be an organic living creature that was somehow fed by the dead prisoners of the island. When going through radiation therapy, which is used to treat cancer, the island saw the US as a threat, and since it was not getting any supplements from any new prisoners since it was closed down in 1963, it somehow managed to multiply itself, similar to a cancer cell, and began attacking the coast of San Francisco. Overall conclusion, it's another good reason not to live in San Francisco. As mentioned in the intro of this video, this alternate timeline of the United States has affected the country in ways that allowed well-known figures to live on while they may have died in our timeline. And one of those people who ended up living started out as a celebrity, but eventually became the first to go from movie star status to presidential status, and that was none other than James Dean.
What are we waiting for? Let's bring them back home.
According to the video, no president had garnered such immense popularity within the time Dean experienced it ever. His campaign focused entirely on ending the Vietnam War, and the general public was ecstatic. His biggest opponent was Richard Nixon. However, polls indicated that Dean had a massive lead over Nixon despite little to no public appearances. Dean even invited Nixon to race cars on a track just weeks before the election. Nixon reportedly told Dean, "To hell with it, I'm voting for you. You're already a better president than I am." Many anti-Dean groups were so fed up with his campaign to the point where they hijacked radio stations and cut power lines in order to prevent pro-Dean advertisements from being shown on TV. They even went on to put up anti-Dean ads that claimed he was Satan himself.
James Dean is no man.
Despite their best efforts, Dean went on to win the presidency, and during his inaugural address, Dean gave a speech that stated that his voice should not be the only voice heard from America, and that the world should instead listen to the citizens of the country. He then invited many guest speakers on stage, such as musicians and, most notably, Martin Luther King Jr. And according to this video, the inaugural address took place in January 1969, 9 months after King's assassination in our timeline, putting him on the list of other figures who lived on in this universe. The video ends with a live broadcast of President Dean addressing the country, but the audio was cut out just seconds in. The anti-Dean groups were noted as the perpetrators, but this only made Dean more popular due to his genuine facial expressions that were showcased. So, we are now aware of James Dean's rise to power in the late 60s, and he will definitely be playing a part in later episodes. On August 17th, 2003, Air Force One made an unannounced trip across the continental United States. Many civilians claim to have seen the aircraft drop packages on various national monuments. This is already starting out in a very foreshadowing manner, as its purpose of the trip is to drop off packages specifically at national monuments. Keep in mind, this is the president's own plane, and it's often called the president's office in the sky. The president at this time, if it's similar to our universe, is most likely George Bush. Does he have any information on these events occurring at the monuments? Anyways, we see a diagram of the plane's journey throughout the country, and we eventually are shown a video recording of the open door of the plane. And then we see this. What is that thing? Is it a ghost, or as the video suggests, an angel? Now, in my opinion, it couldn't be an angel, because if being biblically accurate, angels look more like this. Yeah, not so friendly, at least in physical appearance. The last thing to note is that the plane stopped at Mount Rushmore while flying. The recordings that we saw in Rushmore Revenge happened the same week as Air Force One's trip. Could this link between these events have some purpose later on in the series? Oh, and on top of that, Air Force One did stop at the Statue of Liberty, but looking closely at this image, which is supposed to be at the island where the Statue of Liberty is, the Statue of Liberty is missing from its pedestal. An interview from a lady describing her time as a Lincoln Lurker is played. The lady describes how uncomfortable it was taking on the mantle as a Lincoln Lurker, and this is then followed by an interview with a former senior advisor of the Lincoln Lurkers, I'm assuming, describing the purpose of a Lincoln Lurker. The president will pick an individual without any sort of trial or reason, and that individual will be put inside of the Lincoln Memorial for as long as the president stays in office. The individual usually ends up being someone who treated the current president poorly in his past life. They have surprisingly been around for a long time, and the senior advisor goes as far as to say that they are an American tradition. Due to many guests at the White House claiming that Lincoln Lookers were kept behind portraits of Lincoln, White House officials had to remove paintings of Lincoln in order to prove that there was no space to hold the person behind the paintings. The last audio clip is played, which involves a visitor named Howard Melrose recalling his time at the Lincoln Memorial and witnessing the distressing occurrence happening within Lincoln's statue. This interview is then followed by this video. This serves as video evidence that Lincoln Lookers were kept inside the Lincoln Memorial. And man, imagine being forced to live in a cramped monument for 4 or even 8 years of your life with no one even realizing that you're there. One last thing to note, while a Lincoln Lurker may be looking down at the guests around it, the memorial is also looking at the Washington Monument. This will be explained soon. A song is sung entitled The Special Tree. It goes, "The forest fell swiftly as the lumberjack swung, except for the special tree, which could not be stung. She missed her friends in the hymns they sung, so she started a tune that broke the man's lung." We are then shown a timeline beginning in 1840 with a picture of the special tree, and as it continues, we see that the tree was used to be the foundation of the Washington Monument. After being halted during the Civil War, construction on the Washington Monument was finally completed in 1888 and became a major tourist attraction in 1910. But that same year, up until 1971, 20 individuals would go missing while visiting the monument. They were later given the name the Washington Absentees. We are then shown a film that describes the process of a visitor entering the monument and being pulled to the top by an elevator. Sound waves are shown going up the monument and then back down, which causes the bottom of the elevator to open and the visitor falls to the bottom, killing them. They show another visitor attempting to enter the monument, implying the process will repeat. We continue through the timeline and we see that in the year 2000, the monument was vandalized, similar to Mount Rushmore. These messages say, "The infection is nigh, the music of Washington will end." Now to pause for a second, this message is very similar to the ones on Rushmore. Could the person responsible for those messages be responsible for the ones in the Washington Monument? If so, who is it? But anyways, back to the video. We are then shown one last entry, which is a video recording taken in 2003. It begins with a wide shot of the monument, but then the camera zooms in on something weird pointing out of it. And then, we are shown this. Context is unclear at the moment about what the heck just happened, but this balls to the wall thing we just saw may begin to make more sense once we get into the later videos. But from what can be inferred, the diagram that we watched showed sound waves going up and then going back down. Those sound waves might have been the music that the special tree sung, and somehow that caused the bottom of the elevator to open up and kill the visitor. And somehow the special tree must have eaten the visitor. I'm not exactly sure though. But this is also linked to the reason why I mentioned that the Lincoln Memorial is staring at the Washington Monument. A news broadcast abruptly appears with a story about the Delaware River. Two fishermen had been collecting catfish from the river when they noticed something strange. They found what they described as a bicorn, which was the hats worn by Revolutionary War generals. When one of the fishermen went to pick up the hat, they found what they described as a human scalp underneath it. They both agreed to pull the body out, and hours would pass before they could get it out, and when they did, they noticed the eyelid of the person had twitched. They both took it to one of their homes and put it in a bathtub, and in the middle of the night, they apparently heard the individual scream, "Victory or death," after regaining consciousness only to fall unconscious again. They called the authorities and had them transfer the body to a nearby hospital. After some time, they began to notice that the face of the body looked very familiar. One of them pulled out a $1 bill, and they realized who it was. While the hospital would not confirm the identity of the body, the fishermen took the bicorn hat to the Delaware History Museum, and historians there confirmed that it was an authentic piece from the 18th century. This forged the theory stating that the man was in fact George Washington, and that he had fallen ill while crossing the Delaware River and ended up dying. He was then replaced by a look-alike to keep the war effort going. The broadcast ended with a quote from none other than President James Dean saying, "I'm surprised." There isn't really much left to say about this episode because I pretty much explained the entire thing, so on to the next. John D. Rockefeller was an extremely wealthy businessman who founded the Standard Oil Company in 1870. This guy was also known as the richest man in the world at the highest point of his career, even by today's standards. But in an alternate timeline, he pursued a position far higher than just being the forerunner of an extremely lucrative business. We are presented with two documents that detail the same event. A recollection of a tragedy is Rockefeller's retelling of an incident that has baffled everyone, including Rockefeller himself. He begins by bringing up a moment where construction workers set up a Christmas tree which Rockefeller saw as a symbol of hope for the American people. This inspires him to find a tree that he would bring to Manhattan and put up for the citizens to look at. We then switch to the second document called Virginia in Wonderland. Virginia is a young girl who was involved with the tragedy that Rockefeller based his document on. Virginia explains Mr. Rockefeller's process of picking a tree, and after spending 12 days looking for the perfect tree, he eventually found one to bring home. He called it the special tree. However, the tree took 3 years to be brought back to Manhattan, and Rockefeller and his men tried every method to cut it down at first, but to no avail. He hired the best diggers he could find, and they began the 3-year process of getting the tree out of the ground and into the city. We return to Rockefeller's account as he explains the backlash he had received after the incident mentioned. This is explained in its fullest through Virginia's account, as she expresses her desire to be the first person to put an ornament on the special tree. Branches were glued to the tree per request from the mayor of New York City, and as Virginia tried to put her ornament on the branches, she found out that she could not reach the branches. So, she called 10 of her friends to form a ladder so that she could plant her ornament on top of the tree. She managed to put the ornament on top, but what followed was the incident mentioned before. Shaking commenced, and the branches of the tree fell off. The tree began to curve in the opposite direction of Virginia, creating a perfect arch. And then, lightning began to shoot out of the tree and struck Virginia along with her friends. When she opened her eyes, she found herself in a dark forest filled with endless amounts of special trees. She goes on to say, "I saw so many people. One ran up to me and whispered, 'The trees are not trees.' But, before she could finish her sentence, her audio was cut out, and goes on to say that she returned back to Manhattan along with her friends. But something wasn't right. Virginia did not recognize the street she was on, and the special tree was gone. So, before we go on, this is finally some needed context to what happened in the Washington wormhole video. But another question is brought up because of this, and it is if there are multiple special trees. Because this isn't the same tree that was used to build the Washington Monument with, because that was back in 1840. And this is the 1920s, I'm assuming. And if there is more, where are the others? Anyways, back to the video. Rockefeller's account returns and claims that it would have been better if the children had died in the incident than experienced what had followed. Virginia and her friends were quickly taken to the hospital, and all their parents came to pick them up. But when they all arrived, none of the kids recognized them. The parents did not recognize their own kids either. All the parents were confused and wanted answers, but were asked to leave. Mr. Rockefeller eventually decided to visit the kids in the hospital to try and jog their memories. However, his questions and answers regarding American history did not match the answers given by the kids. Rockefeller goes on to reveal that he actually never owned a massive oil business, but rather served as president for 2 terms. This is another case of alternative American history. Rockefeller was left worried by the kids and went on to claim that they may have been replaced by doppelgangers. After he left, the nurses did x-rays on each of the children to check if there were any broken ribs, but after they got the results back, they were shocked. They would not reveal what shocked them to the kids, but that night, Virginia pressed her ear on a door that the nurses were just on the other side of. All she could hear them saying was, "It's all backward." Virginia went back into her bed that night with her hand on her chest and began to wonder if the beating of her heart was ever on the right side. Rockefeller then goes on to express his regret that he feels for choosing the tree, but then says that the tree might have chosen him. We are then shown this quote by the son of Rockefeller, which is followed by this video. Now, what could this mean? From the looks of it, it could be a recording from as early as the 1980s of what looks like Rockefeller Center in New York City. It also could mean that the powers of the special tree could still somehow be active after all these years, which begs the question, what is keeping it from leaving? And while on the topic of the tree, it is clear that Virginia and the kids were transported to a whole other universe. But what was the universe that they came from, and what was the universe that they traveled to? Well, according to some of the comments on the video, the special tree serves as a teleportation device to go from the Monument Mythos universe to our universe. A very wholesome slideshow video is shown of a trip that the creator, Lauren, took to the Grand Canyon. By the way, this photo I showed in my Goosebumps iceberg video was taken at the Grand Canyon. Unrelated, I know, but there you go. We're shown a bunch of different photos as text appears throughout it, giving context to certain images. Then text appears that says that Lauren saw something really weird. We're then shown this clip. We return to the uplifting music as we view more photos of the Grand Canyon. But then, the second and final clip is shown. We come back to the wholesome slideshow, and it continues on for the rest of the video. However, it ends with text where Lauren says that she did some research on what she saw, and it turned out to be what's called a canyon crown, and that it uses vinegar to shrink back into its body. This explains why text appeared in the first video saying it smelled like vinegar. The last bit of text is the most unsettling, as it says that her and her family went on the trip because her dad was looking for her sister Maya. It then says that she thinks that the canyon crown was Maya. We end with black and white pictures of people without their heads, and we are told thanks for watching. Okay, so what I can guess is that a canyon crown is some kind of giant human head that can shrink in size, then grow back to its larger state. Another thing to note is that Maya shares the same name as Maya Arnoldson, who was the interviewed former Lincoln Lurker that was misidentified. Could this be the same Maya? But you might wonder how she could transform into this. Well, she did mention eating some kind of weird soup while being a Lincoln Lurker. Maybe that caused her transformation? Plus, her time as a Lincoln Lurker took place in the 80s, because she also mentioned being apologized by Reagan, who was most likely President Ronald Reagan. But more context on this video will definitely be given deeper into the series. This episode is split into 6 parts, with the first part being Sculptor. We are shown an exchange via Morse code between 4 different individuals who are deciding on designs for a potential statue to be placed on the dome of the US Capitol. U.S. engineer Montgomery Meigs contacts Italian artist Thomas Crawford to sculpt and cast the statue, but after several delays, Crawford mysteriously passes away, and Italian detective Alfonso Zaffino tells Meigs the situation. We are now at part 2, Daughter. The daughter of Thomas Crawford, Nina, writes in a journal and tells about her father's sketches for Freedom, which is the statue he was working on, and she finds them beautiful. When he leaves one day to go to the studio to work on it, he for some reason never returns. Nina's mom rushes to the studio and comes back only to go straight for her room. Alfonso Zaffino then shows up with a few of his men and goes into Nina's mother's room to find her crying. Her mother kept yelling, "She has her eyes! She has her eyes!" which prompted Nina to leave and ran to nearby docks, where she jumped onto the boat that was shipping the statue to the U.S. She climbed into the box that held the parts of the statue inside of it and stayed inside as the boat left the dock. While at sea, the box she was inside of opened and she hopped out to find food to eat, but is confronted by an entity that she described has her father's eyes. It took her, and somehow they both ended up in a jungle where the entity's sword cut through the trees around them. They jumped down into a hole, and the entity started a fire while staring at Nina. We move on to part 3, Captain, which describes the log of the captain that operated the boat that Nina stowed away on as he travels from Italy and to his abrupt stop in Gibraltar due to holes in the storage room causing water to get into the boat. As customs officers came to inspect the cargo the ship was carrying, they learned that it was completely empty upon opening. The fourth part, Commissioner, starts with a voice describing a force that pushed its way up a mountain. Hundreds of trees were knocked down to the point where people who lived nearby pressured the speaker and 13 other officers to investigate the scene. When they reached the top, they found a crevice which prompted one of the officers to investigate it, and when he reached the bottom, they found a statue along with the remains of a person flat into the ground. They managed to lift the statue out of the hole and found that the blade held by the statue matches the cuts of the trees that were knocked down. However, Gibraltar police believe it could have just been wind. Upon a second investigation of the hole, they found a journal and began to translate it to English. Craftsman is the 5th part of the video, which is a retelling of an old story. It describes Freedom as the tall woman holding plaster within her who overheard a violent conflict occurring in Gibraltar. She felt that matters had to be taken into her own hands, but was soon locked up and had the plaster removed from the inside of her body. She was forced into a still position, but is prone to one day awake again. The final part, Sculptor, begins with an ominous newspaper article claiming that the Anti-Dean Association has stormed the U.S. Capitol, parallel to real-life events, and the statue that sat on top of the Capitol's dome was shot down by gunfire. This is the footage of that happening. Shortly after watching that, we are shown this final recording. So, wrapping it all up, what I believe is happening is that the eyes of Thomas Crawford were placed into the eye slots of the statue, and somehow that caused it to become alive and become sentient as well. The statue was the entity that stole Nina from the ship and then proceeded to kill her while in the cave. When it was brought back to the Capitol and then shot down by gunfire, it somehow came back to life and possibly began attacking people within the Capitol. It took a while for me to realize that in this clip, the head of the statue is hanging upside down and slightly angled as shown by the hat and the part of the face as well. The scream heard might be someone that stumbled upon the statue and was most likely killed. And then we see this, which according to the comment section of this video, could be a canyon crown. They also say that the eyes that are seen here could be the eyes of Thomas Crawford. And that was my take on the first season of episodes in the Monument Mythos analog horror series. This video was mostly a way to help me understand the series more clearly, as I never watched in the correct order of episodes displayed on the wiki, but it was fun to talk about it, and I hope that everyone who watches this understands the series better after listening to my take on it. I know there are now 3 other seasons to tackle, which will definitely provide some answers to the questions I presented, so depending on whether you guys like this video and want a video on season 2, then I will definitely put that in the works. Anyways, I cannot thank you guys enough for the support that I've been receiving since the Goosebumps Iceberg video. I've never gained this much attraction from any group of viewers who happen to find my videos, and it's extremely overwhelming in a good way. I definitely want to continue making videos where I can just talk about certain topics that I find interesting regarding the internet, pop culture, or anything weird and uncanny, so keep checking back for more videos within that realm. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all very soon.